As we consider what's going on here everywhere so far, the only consideration that's been made is what's Job's secret sin? And as we saw in the last 2 chapters, no one could produce any example of what that sin might be. No one could accuse him of stealing from them. No one could accuse him of being dishonest. No one could accuse him of anything. So he's saying, please, if I've sinned, let me know. And then he goes to God. He says, God, if I've sinned, let me know what it is. And both answers come up rhetorically negative. So Bildad jumps in here and says, well, maybe you didn't sin. Maybe it was your kids. By the way, crummy thing to say to someone who just lost his whole family, right? Like even a couple months later, I don't think it's ever time to jump in on the, well, maybe your kids were really awful people and God killed them. We shouldn't go there, right? It's not a really sensitive way to go about life. Nevertheless, he's struggling and straining to answer this important question. He's asking, maybe you didn't sin. Maybe your son sinned and you lost everything because you were supporting them. Maybe your involvement or your condoning of sin was part of the problem. So we go back to the front of the book and find that this introduction was so powerfully important. Chapter 1 and verse 4 says, and his sons would go and feast in their houses, each on his appointed day, and would send an invite their 3 sisters to eat and drink with them. So it was when the days of feasting had run their course that Job would send and sanctify them. He would rise early in the morning and offer burnt offerings according to the number of them all. For Job said, it may be that my sons have sinned and cursed God in their hearts. Thus Job did regularly. So, what do we know? We know that Job's children were in a good relationship, a right relationship with God. Why? Because their father was constantly caring for them and making sure that they were in a right relationship with God. So we can write this off as a possibility, right? I mean, now we have to be very fair to Bildad. He didn't know that this was the case. But at any point, we have to recognize that he's asking a legitimate question, and yet we find that thankfully the text has answered this for us. However, what he's asking is a very natural human question. If you think of John chapter 9, we see here an interesting similar point. It says, now as Jesus passed by, he saw a man who was blind from birth. And his disciples asked him, saying, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Jesus answered, neither this man nor his parents sinned, but that the works of God should be revealed in him. I must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. The night is coming when no one can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. So at this point, he heals the man, but this is what I want to point out. Those disciples see this man born blind, an undoubted tragedy. So then the question is who sinned, right? Because for any hardship to happen in their mind, in our human minds, it has to be someone's fault. It has to be someone's sin. So was it possible, and the Jews believed it was, that this child sinned in the womb and thus, or sinned somewhere early in life and thus was punished by losing his sight? That's pretty hard judgment to put on an infant, particularly a preborn infant. Or then it must have been that he's bearing the sin of his father or his mother throughout his life. Again, a hard picture of God. But Jesus points out that this person, this man, neither parent sinned, neither nor did he sin, but he was simply a product or a result of sin in this world, and yet this was going to be used to glorify God. How? Perfect to our situation with Job. Right? Job's friends are saying, is it you? Maybe your kids sinned? Maybe it's your wife. No one's brave enough to say that. I bet Mrs. Job was right off the edge of the scene with a club in her hand. Don't you even think about it. But anyway, whatever the case, however that happened, they're looking for anyone to blame, anyone's fault to make it. And we do this, right? Do we do this? Whenever something goes wrong, we're going to find out why it went wrong, whose fault it was. And if nothing else, we raise our hands to God and go, why, God? Why would you allow this to happen to me? And if we could only take this fuller picture and say, Lord, this is painful, and I despise this, I hate this, I don't like it, I'm sad, I'm sorrowful, I'm lost, whatever it is. But I trust that you were able to use this for your glory. I trust that while this is a horrible thing, that you are able to make this your ultimate masterpiece of praise for yourself and for your name. Romans 8, of course, gives us a similar idea. 32 and following. It says, he who did not spare his own son, but delivered him up for us, how shall he not also with him freely give us all things? And then back in 28, and we know all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to his purpose. God has given you everything in Jesus Christ. He is able to bring every situation around to his ultimate glory. And while you might lack everything up to food or the ability to take your next breath in this life, you will never lack anything that you need for life and godliness. That is to say, eternal life and godliness.